please join me in reciting Al-Fatiha. And if you recite loud, it will be heard loud and clear everywhere. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Before you go, I'm going to show you my cultural room. Okay, so when we're done, we'll be praying. So if you could just read our after lecture today is on fundamentalism. This is the word which has been thrown around for the past many years, and some people in the Western media think that Muslim and fundamentalist are synonymous. You can exchange one by the other, but not realizing that Islam is not a monolith like many other faiths. It has a spectrum, like the rainbow, of different colors and different colors and different depths of adherence and different interpretations of the same passages in the Quran. So I am very pleased and honored that Dr. Fatima Al-Hayani has accepted our request to be the speaker today. She does not need introduction to all of you. She is not only part of Islamic Center, but in my mind, she is the Islamic Center. She has been part of this community and for very, very long time. And I remember in the old mosque, she used to teach Sunday school. She also taught Sunday school here. And she also acted as principal of the full-time school that we had one time. She has a doctorate in Islamic studies from University of Michigan. She has been a sought-after speaker around the country. And she has spoken on many different Islamic topics. So she's going to talk to us about fundamentalism. And again, as if one time I imposed on her was not enough, I'm going to impose on her for next week as well. So she's going to tell us about the effects of war on women. As we know, that any war, any conflict, anywhere in the world, women and children are the first victims of those conflicts. And she will tell us about the effects of war in women in context to Iraq, but as well as other places, and particularly what's happening currently in Gaza. So please welcome Dr. Al-Hayani.
How do you turn it on? Okay, patient. Oh. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for coming. I just want to explain initially that this is just the beginning. The topic is extremely wide, and there's no way you can cover it in 1 hour or 2 hours. So this is the beginning, and then let's hope we can have a discussion about that. When people in the West hear the term fundamentalism, the next word that comes to mind is Islamic or Muslim. It is as if Islam and Muslims have coined the term fundamentalism and claimed exclusive rights to it. To the average non-Muslim in today's society, only Muslims are prone to extreme violent behavior, and Islam is a violent religion prodding its adherents to commit violent acts. Moreover, when the term Islamic fundamentalism is mentioned, the term terrorist follows immediately. In fact, the concise Oxford Dictionary defines fundamentalism as the strict maintenance of ancient or fundamental doctrines of any religion, especially Islam. Here, Islam is singled out from all other religions. The implied meaning or the suggestive meaning, puts Islamic fundamentalism as the prime example and not as one example of many. Mark Jurgensmeyer, in his book God at War, this is a very good book, it's been reprinted, he notes that all fundamentalists claim the superiority of their religion. Thus, they are proponents of good, whereas their opponents are proponents of evil. And I'm sure all of you who have been listening to the news in the past few years have heard this statement. Almost all fundamentalists have a strong commitment to save mankind from evil and false beliefs in order to guarantee a place in heaven for themselves. Another phenomenon common to fundamentalists is that all those who espouse different views are enemies, intent on destroying them and denigrating their faith. Their goal is to fight for the sake of God and to right that which they believe is wrong. And notice the they, not what the belief is. They could be Tamil separatists who, by the way, introduced suicide bombing, yes. Muslims were not the ones who did. Or it could be the Japanese apocalypse on Shinriko, who threw a gas bomb in a Japanese subway, Timothy McVeigh, or the Sikh separatists, the Basque separatists, Hindu nationalists, Jewish nationalists, Arab nationalists, or Jewish, Christian, or Muslim fundamentalists. The term fundamentalism does not exist in the Muslim vocabulary. We did not create that term. Western commentators have used this term, which originated from Christianity. It technically means to adhere to the basic fundamentals of one's belief. Thus, and following this definition, all people or individuals who follow the tenets of their faith are fundamentalists. Every Muslim, then, is one as well, because he or she believes in one God, the prophets, their revealed books, the last day of judgment, and prays, fasts, gives zakat or tithe, and performs a pilgrimage when and if possible. In that sense, anyone who observes these acts can be considered a fundamentalist. Where does Islam stand vis-a-vis fundamentalism or extremism? The Quran is very clear concerning this issue. We are told that the Muslim community must follow the middle of the road path. A Muslim, ummatan wasata, which means a community of moderation. And the Quran said, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونُ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. So thus we made you a moderate community, that you may be witnesses to humanity, and that the messenger may be a witness to you as well. Muslims must avoid war at all costs. In essence, Islam is against violence and or any violent action against those who have not transgressed against them. This does not mean that Muslims should not defend themselves if attacked. It is a Muslim's duty to protect the self, the family, the country, and the oppressed. And the Quran says, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. The most important part of this verse is the fact, do not transgress. Do not cause harm to others unless you are harmed by them. Even in war situations, Muslims must not kill women, children, and old men, or any civilians who are not fighting them. Furthermore, they are duty-bound to protect the weak and the minorities who happen to be living among them, and must not coerce them to change their religion. And I'd like to note here that during the Islamic civilization, the Islamic time, when we were way up there, many minorities were living amongst us, and they were all protected, and they were given the right to pursue the faith that they believe in. Rather, they have a duty to protect them. Throughout history, Muslims generally, and throughout the Muslim rule over a very large area of the known world, have adhered to these rules most of the time. The Quran talks about لَا يَنْهَاكُمُ اللَّهُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ لَمْ يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ. So therefore, the Quran is saying that The only time you really have to go to war is when someone is attacking you. Now, here is an interesting concept about suicide. The Quran says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. The Quran says, do not kill someone unless there is a reason or they have attacked or done a lot of things. The following verse deals with those who kill themselves, which is forbidden in Islam. Now, when we talk about suicide bombers, this addresses that issue. The life given to us is a gift from Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and must not be taken on purpose. This includes suicide bombers who end up killing themselves and other innocent individuals. And the verse is very, very clear. The Quran at the end said, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't kill yourselves. So what has happened throughout the centuries that ultimately created a surge of Muslim fundamentalists? There's always a reason behind whatever is happening. Before a discussion on the causes of Islamic fundamentalism, a brief explanation about understanding the message of Islam is necessary. Islam is based on the Quran, which was revealed in the 7th century to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The revelations, which lasted about 23 years, came to address specific issues and problems facing the Arab society at that time. Others were basic instructions for general use. Inshallah, in the future, I will have a lecture about this particular point. This is a very, very important point. Moreover, certain topics were addressed in a gradual manner, such as the prohibition on drinking. The first admonishment came in 443 when the Quran commanded Muslims not to pray while intoxicated, so as not to err in the reading of the Quran and in following the rituals of prayer. Later, in 590, the consumption of alcohol was forbidden. Such an example emphasizes the point that the Quran must be read and understood holistically. What do I mean by that? You cannot take one verse out of context and say, this is the law, this is what the Quran says, this is what God says. We must address the cause and the time of revelation, which in Arabic called asbab and awqat al-nuzul, meaning that we need to take certain things from a historical and literal point of view. A thematic approach must be applied in order to understand the intent and the meaning of the Quran. It is imperative to address each topic or theme holistically. Otherwise, we would be faced with many contradictions. To pick and choose without a full follow-up of the subject throughout the scriptures creates a limited approach. This is prevalent in all religion and is not limited to Islam. I mean, I've been in panel discussions with Christians and with Jews, and some of them pick and choose certain verses and say this is what it is without looking at the holistic picture. There is a problem with this approach because it allows each group to pick and choose certain verses out of context from the holy text and use them as the only or the ultimate stand. And I'd like to emphasize the word ultimate, meaning there's no discussion about it. This is it. Within each religion, there are those who apply a limited approach to augment their arguments concerning certain topics. And in this area, I would say that the certain topic that most Muslims adhere to is the status of women. They address that very strongly. However, some Muslims, as well as other groups who commit aggressive acts, consider themselves as liberators, trying to rid themselves of centuries of occupation, exploitation, and oppression, either by a foreign power, corrupt governments, and or their leaders. Fundamentalism did not come up out of nowhere. There are causes, and one of the causes is basically oppression. They justify their behavior by following statements from the scriptures taken out of context to justify their acts. Many believe they are doing God's work on earth. And it gives me chills when I hear these suicide bombers saying, Allahu Akbar, God is great, as if God said, go and kill these innocent people. I mean, if you look at what's happening right now in Russia, they say ISIS did it. And if they did that, that's totally against Islamic law, totally against the Quran. Those people are not fighting them. Those people have nothing to do with the government of Russia, but they were killed. Let us study the following verse that has been thrown at me in many lectures about Islam. Some Muslims quote the first part of the following verse to use violence. Non-Muslims quote the same to prove their point about militant Islam. وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ ثَقَفْتُمُوهُمْ وَأَخْرِجُوهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَخْرَجُوكُمْ. Kill them wherever you overtake them. And I remember in 9/11, I was supposed to be lecturing at the university 9/13, 2 days after 9/11. And everybody said, don't go, it's too dangerous, don't do it, but I did. And sure enough, somebody came with that verse attacking me, say, see what your Quran says? But the problem is, and that's the subject I was talking about that we need to discuss in another situation, they don't follow up what the Quran says. To read the Quran is a very difficult task. And you cannot take one verse and let it go. You need to follow through the thought in a circular way to get to the point that the Quran is trying to make. So what is if you do that, you read the first part, then it says here, وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. If you use basically bad information and agitate violence, it's worse than killing. And then the last part, which I think is very important, وَلَا تُقَاتِلُوهُمْ عِنْدَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. And do not fight them at the sacred mosque unless they fight you. So when you read the first part, but you don't finish up the thought that the Quran is trying to make, you miss the whole point. And many of them do, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. So many Muslims today look back at history to study the causes that produce such feelings. It would be also senseless to talk about this issue without reverting to the reasons that led to the events of today. Simply speaking, there are many factors that contributed to the present situation. Muslims look nostalgically at their history and recall the great power they had from the 9th century through the 13th century. Muslims controlled a large part of Asia, North and East Africa, and parts of Europe. They excelled in all the sciences, philosophy, and the arts. They were the main contributors to the European Renaissance. However, the West rarely acknowledges such contributions. Moreover, the European powers, in the cloak of saving the Holy Land from the hands of the heathens, i.e. the Muslims, began what would be considered by Muslims as the beginning of a crusade, which was initiated by Pope Urban II, and one that would last to the present time. The Crusades came to Muslim lands and victimized not only Muslims, but also Christians and Jews. In fact, to quote a horrified eyewitness to the Fourth Crusade, Geoffrey de Ville-Ardouin of the court of Champagne, he said, I am sure that since the creation of the universe, a plundering worse than this one has not been witnessed. In fact, they say that the blood on Jerusalem reached the knees of the soldiers. Another debacle came after the defeat of the Muslims in Spain and during the Spanish Inquisition in the 15th century, when both Muslims and Jews were killed, tortured, forced to convert, or thrown out of the country. Looking back at that period, I find it very interesting to note that most of the expelled Jews went to live in many Muslim and Arab countries to live in peace there. It is really ironic. If you consider what is happening today in Gaza, and you look at what Muslims have done, they've taken these Jews who have been persecuted and gave them peace. Then in 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt. Then the French invaded Algeria in 1847, Tunisia, 1881, Morocco, 1912, all Muslim Arab countries. Most of the Quranic schools were shut down. Arabic, which is the language of the Quran and of the indigenous population, was reduced to a second language. Mosques were turned into churches, and the only education available was in French and open to only a few students. Such behavior was repeated in Lebanon as well. Tell you something really funny. My mother, who didn't speak a word of French, she would say to me, walk on the trottoir. Trottoir is sidewalk. It's French. Take the elevator, it's ascenseur. Many French words, croissant, baguette, all of these French words, and she was using them as if they were Arabic words. Led by the National Liberation Front, the Algerians were among the first of the third world countries to win independence after losing about 1 million people in the War of Liberation. Imagine. In 1992, when the Islamic Salvation Front was winning, there was a military coup d'etat negating the elections with the blessings of France and the West. This is a very important point. Whenever there is a group coming in that is supposed to maybe help the people and the West don't approve of, they make sure it is not accepted. And in 1996, a constitutional referendum banned religious parties. Libya was colonized by the Italians and finally gained its independence. India and Pakistan, which was part of India, were colonized by the British. Most of Africa was colonized as well by many European countries and are still suffering the consequences of such colonization to this day. Such were the conditions in the Muslim world till the 1950s, when most of them became independent. After that, most countries in the Middle East came under the control of the Muslim Ottomans, who supported Germany during World War II, World War I. In the Treaty of Sèvres, August 18, 1920, the Allies divided the Ottoman Empire, placing the majority of the area in the Middle East under a mandate controlled and placed under France and England. The Arabs, Christians, and Muslims sided with the Allies against the Ottoman Turks with the promise that they would be free countries. Now, I hear a lot of people saying they should have stayed with the Ottomans, but they were promised and they believed them. Instead, France and England divided the land and colonized the Arab countries, with the latter controlling Egypt, Sudan, Iraq, and Palestine, and the former controlling Greater Syria. What the French did after that was to divide the Syrian territory into what is today Lebanon and Syria. In fact, the early Arabs that came from the area, they were all called Syrians or Turks. And then that was before the division. Worse yet, they created in Lebanon a state based on religious sects and parties, with the Catholic Maronites, who were a minority, holding the presidency and key positions in the government, the Sunni Muslims, the prime ministry, the Shia Muslims, the leadership in the parliament, which was also divided among all the religious groups. So you can see the mess that Lebanon is facing today. It stems from this kind of setup. England, on the other hand, created the state of Kuwait, which was Iraqi territory, signed the Balfour Declaration to allow the Jews to settle in Palestine on Arab land. The United States and the Western states supported the creation of the State of Israel and Palestine. As a consequence, there were many Palestinians who fled the wars and remain to this day as refugees throughout the world. The Arab countries entered more than one war against the Israelis. You know, I hear it all the time. Why don't the Arab countries do this, do that? Well, they did. Unfortunately, as everyone knows, the Arabs and the Palestinians lost not only thousands of men, but also more territory with each war. To discuss the reasons for such defeats demands another whole lecture. Suffice it to say, occupied for centuries and unequipped after years of such occupation, the Arabs could not win against the West. any more than we're winning right now. With the United States supporting the Israelis with arms, with money, with support, what can the Arabs do? The belief was and still is that the colonial powers personified by the West were and are intent on superimposing their own ideologies and denigrating the Muslim faith, traditions, and culture. Muslims watched as the colonial powers helped create governments as puppets ready to serve the colonial powers in lieu of protection for their positions. Many were dictators who did not have a mandate to help educate their people and improve the economic situation in their countries. Yet they were still supported by the West. Such conditions reinforce the belief, right or wrong, that the West is intent on destroying Islam. Many Muslims see a connection beginning with the Crusades. The last straws were the attacks on Afghanistan and Iraq, two Muslim countries. Such conditions created a situation whereas Muslims believe the secular world does not and cannot help the dire situation they are facing. The solution was to apply the Sharia, Islamic law, as the only way to solve all problems. As a result, many Muslim organizations were created. Some applied violence, others propagated changes through a stricter application of the Sharia. Some examples would be to issue fatwas advocating assassination of certain individuals. Others considered certain scholars as apostate, issued a decree to force them to divorce their wives, since a Muslim woman cannot marry a non-Muslim. Some were ostracized, others forced to leave their country. What I would like to do is I would like to end with the following question. If we look at violent acts as terrorist acts, are all violent acts based on fundamental concepts to achieve an ultimate goal considered terrorist acts? Was the Revolutionary War in the United States against the British terrorist act a terrorist act when millions died? Was the Civil War against the institution of slavery in the south of the US a terrorist act? And I think everyone should think about these two wars. They were done for a reason and could be considered terrorist act if it were taken by someone else. So what I'd like to know, I hurried up because I wanted to make sure I covered the questions. If you have any questions. Any questions? Yes. We'll give them the, yeah.
I want to ask you a question. Some Muslims would justify doing all these things. There are many, many reasons, like you mentioned, but some would say, well, they come and kill our children or women. Why can't we do the same to them?
Who said, I'm sorry, say it again.
Muslims, in different parts of the world will have this as a justification. I know the answer, but I want to see if there is anything more you can add to it. And they would use the word intiqam. In the Quran, Allah said that I'm Zu intiqam, that I take swift, quote unquote revenge. I don't think intiqam word is revenge, but I do what they have done and they get their punishment. So that's the right translation of the word intiqam. But they translated that as revenge. If Allah does the revenge, then why can't we take a revenge?
But the Quran does not talk about revenge
And
to innocent people who are not the perpetrators of that act. A sin of a sin, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for, if someone did that to you, then yes, you can address that. But when you go and kill innocent people who were not participants in that act, then in Islam, it is forbidden. It is totally forbidden.
So So this opens up a rather bigger question. Majority of the people on October 7th who were killed by Hamas were not directly involved with the persecution. They lived in a country. You can say that all of them were suppressors. So how can you put that in context to the question which was asked?
What Hamas did to these people who were not combative against them directly, according to Islamic law, is forbidden. It is forbidden. You cannot do that. If they had addressed, let's say, soldiers or military institutions, that would have been acceptable under Islamic law because they are oppressed. The people in Gaza today are not just in Gaza. I mean, we always talk concentrate on Gaza. Let's look at the West Bank. The West Bank is a mess. In fact, people there cannot guarantee they're going to be alive the next day. They cannot guarantee they're going to have water. They cannot guarantee that they're going to be able to go to work. The checkpoints that they have, the abuse that they have throughout, this is totally unacceptable. So if a person attacks a soldier who is attacking them, this is permissible under Islamic law. But to go to kill a child or to kill a woman or to kill a man who is not holding a weapon against you under Islamic law, it is totally forbidden. You cannot do that. But at the same time, I'm not stopping. At the same time, I can understand the frustration of the Palestinians and all oppressed people throughout the world, not just the Palestinians. Because for 75 years, they have been oppressed. For 75 years, somebody from outside came, took over their land, and kicked many of them out. Many of them are still refugees today. I can understand the frustration. I can understand why they would resort to something like that. But
can you justify it?
I do not justify it. Islamic law does not justify it. It does not. Any more than what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank. What they're doing is 1,000 times more atrocious than what has happened. It's very, very bad.
I was going to say that resistance movements can be violent and non-violent. And if you have a non-violent movement, you can achieve certain objectives as well. If it's persistent and deliberate and well organized. My question really is, besides that comment, my question is, it is offshoots of groups, like ISIL has so many groups. And my suspicion is that a smaller group is truly uncontrolled, they set their own agenda, they set their own targets. And some of the cruelest thing they do, that's the one really goes back and creates a bad name for the actual resistant movement a person has. So the true resistant movement can be violent or not. Violence against military, violence against the police. But these smaller groups are the ones who really malign those genuine resistant movements, which can opt for both actions.
I have no problems with what you said. The only thing I say is that whether they're a small group or a large group, the important issue is when they try to justify it under Islamic law, that's when I have a problem with them. When Islam says you do not kill innocent people, you do not kill women, you do not kill children, you do not kill older men, you cannot kill any human being who is not holding arms against you. And you go and do that. And then you justify it. The word justify is what really bothers me the most. They justify that. And I think that is totally wrong. That is totally wrong. They need to be able to figure out a different way of addressing the problem. And this is another topic. But why are we in this mess? Are we following really Islam? Are Muslims following Islam really? This is the issue. If you're following Islam, then you give, then you participate, then you get engaged. And many, unfortunately, Muslims are not. I mean, I go to Lebanon all the time, my country too. They're not involved at all with the politics. They complain, don't get me wrong. They complain night and day. But are you doing anything? Are you voting? Are you contributing? Are you doing something? Are you expanding your mind? Instead, I find Muslims are regressing, trying to adhere to periphery of what Islam is, but not to the essence of what Islam is. And I think that is the crux of the problem, to me. We need to go to the crux of what Islam tells us to do. I mean, if you look at the verse, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. This is a chapter that I love very much. Because what it says is, have you seen the one who's lying about his faith? فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ. Who is this person? This person is the one who does not feed the hungry, who does not help the orphans, who do not do the good things. And if you follow the circular idea of this short chapter, you will find out it is those people who pray, but yet they don't help, they don't act. And I really think, to me anyway, this is a problem. It's not enough to go and pray. It's not enough to fast. But what do you do to complete the circle? And that's what the Quran says. You lie about your religion by performing outward manifestation of your religion, but not the essence and the crux of your religion. And that, to me, is what's missing. I see a lot of Muslims who follow those, and yet I see they're not doing anything to really follow the essence of what Islam is all about.
So that will solve all the problems?
That would solve part of the problems. It takes us to the base of what Islam is all about, helping the poor, no matter who they are. I mean, I've had Muslims telling me, you shouldn't have any friends who are not Muslims. Oh, really? How did Islam spread if that's what the Prophet did? There would be no Islam. But anyway, that's another topic.
Well, you're so right, Fatima. These are the words of wisdom.
Turn it on.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
So there is personally, whenever I see situation like what's going on, I go back to Quran and try to find out, what Quran says. And unfortunately, I don't remember the words, which is not unusual. I guess I'm getting old. So the verse says about, the situation when the Prophet and his companion migrated to Medina, but there was a lot of Muslims left behind. Some of the Muslims were left behind, and they were tortured. So, and they were crying for help. This verse was revealed to Prophet that, where are you? Why can't you go and help them? I think the problem is with Ummah, And I'm not trying to say, everybody should pull their guns out and attack Israel, but at least they should show solidarity. And there are different ways of, impressing your point. But out of 54 countries, I don't believe there was a single country to come out. And
I call them non-countries.
Non-countries. I think that's how.
They are Muslim non-countries.
Everyone has its own vested interest.
Yeah.
And some of them they take opportunity and say to America, well, we are on your side.
Yeah.
Who knows behind the scene? I'm just gesturing you.
But that's what the Quran says.
But that's, you should stay together.
Yeah, if you have religion, if you have faith, deen means faith, If you have faith, then you do A, B, C, D. And we're not even doing A to begin.
Well, I keep saying that we are not, to be honest with you, by definition, we are not even Muslims. If you
Oh, now, let's be
I'm gonna
careful.
get into it.
I-
I told him the last time, I don't call myself a practicing Muslim, although I pray, I fast. And,
I was-
I mean-
I was fast asleep, but you woke me up.
and the reason is,
Why you say made such a drastic statement? Because there is some criterion that if anyone falls short of that, we're not Muslims?
no, here is the point. I think we call Islam, praying 5 times, fasting. Fasting is the only ritual which has consequences. It can produce a result. Namaz, prayer, which you call supplication, you can pray all night long. In the morning, you'll be tired, there'll be not a single thing which will happen. I think you wasted the next day too. So you wasted 2 days now. So the rituals don't give you results. Deen does give you a result. When you stick to Deen, you will see the outcome in this life and the life hereafter. If you stick to rituals, you will not see a single result in this life and at that, not in the life hereafter.
Let me say one thing. The Quran says, إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر.
Wow.
نعدكم لعلكم تتقون. Which means that when people ask me these questions, I say, no, keep on praying. Because one of these days, you might read a verse from the Quran and it opens your heart and you realize you're doing something wrong. I'm going to correct it. So I say, keep on praying. You never know. One day the light might come up and the door might open. So keep on doing the rituals. I'm not saying, for example, Ramadan. All I hear since I was this high, what are we going to eat today? The minute we open our eyes, all they're thinking is about food. And then after I studied for my PhD, I'm reading. That's not what fasting is all about. It's not, you fast all day, you're not eating, and then you go and binge. I mean, it makes that's not the idea. So what I'm saying is, but do I say don't fast? No. How do I know? Maybe one day the light might shine, might come, and then you might see what it's all about.
Well, I think the point is back to the same thing. Rituals don't give you results except for fasting. Fasting is the only one, or only ritual of all the rituals which can produce results. You get stronger mentally, physically. It's physical training. In Islam, there is no such thing separate army to defend your country, army to attack other countries. Well, there's no attack.
Yeah.
But every Muslim is a soldier. This is our training. That's what I call Ramadan. This is like
No, I suggest you watch out the word soldier.
again.
I suggest you watch that out.
Basically,
It might give the wrong impression.
Basically, this Muslim, every Muslim
Yeah.
is a soldier of Islam.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, whatever you do.
You need,
Absolutely, there is no question in mind.
we need to be
And
activists.
this is a boot camp.
Yeah, we need to be activists.
Ramadan is a boot camp.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
only under training.
Yes,
Those who can do it and get stronger mentally, physically,
Right.
otherwise.
right.
But I think there was another part which I forgot.
Okay.
I wish somebody did. I'm talking.
My belief has been that my religion teaches me decency, treating people well, teaches me love. For
Don't you think every religion does that?
humanity.
I believe every religion
These are
does
the
that.
universal values
Mm.
a person drives from their faith. A Christian can do the same thing and drive the similar values. A Jew can do that. But for me to have all those values, I feel that the way I was brought up, I acquired all those values because of my faith.
Right.
But if a person doesn't have those values, it doesn't matter what he does. After feeling
Yeah.
the ritual, maybe he hasn't attained the full benefit of it.
But don't you think that not,
Some rituals he's against them, but rituals do help you to concentrate.
they have their place.
It's like a meditation.
Yes,
Helps you to concentrate.
I believe in
Makes you
prayer.
wonder.
I do.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe, but the thing is not understanding and not learning your faith. It's understanding the intent of your faith. See, that's why the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, إنما الأعمال بالنيات ولكل امرئ ما نوى, meaning your actions are dependent upon your intentions. So if your intention is to take the best out of your religion and apply it in your life, then you learn the lesson. But to go and learn how to pray and just to fast and say Al-Fatiha and do this and do that, that's not it. It's how you take the essence of your religion and you apply it in a positive way when you're dealing with other people, with other issues. That's what it's all about. It's good.
Yani, I think this is very interesting.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
I'm going to get away from the personal beliefs and people.
Mm.
I think we're talking here about a phenomenon which is international. It's all over the place. It's been in history going on and so on. It reaches climax these days and last 10, 20 years. For the sake of, I'm sure each one of us here doesn't want to see the fundamentalist idea, doesn't want to see anything about terrorism or what have you. But these are all wishes. We need to understand, from my perspective, I would like to isolate three things. One is the regimes in the Arab world in particular, and the Islamic world in general. The second faction is obviously the fundamentalists themselves, the group that really incur these atrocities. The third is the general public, which everybody, most of the people, right? Those are the three groups. Actually, it looks to me the regimes, the attitude of the states, say Egypt, president of Egypt, King of Jordan, or whatever.
Actually, all over.
All over the place. The fact of the matter, it looks to me, these people, these regimes, have the fundamentalist idea in a direct way, an indirect way, if not direct. The reason for it is that because of their obviously, in a way, I don't want to say collaboration, if you will, with the West, their collaboration with against the Ummah issues, and so on and so forth. Egypt, Jordan, we know originally they got together, with Israel. We understand historically they're really in a very bad situation. Now we see Saudi Arabia, we see everybody else, Bahrain and Emirates, Morocco, Sudan. Could you believe that? Sudan, and they are to their ears in problems, and they will start doing that. There's talk about Libya. So what it seems happening is everybody is putting their hand in the hand of the United States. United States is the one who is making all the trouble in the Middle East, especially in Palestine. So at the end of the day, so the result of that, there's those group who are, for a reason or other, their interpretation for the Quran and the Hadith is in such a way that they take it to the limit, and at the end we see what we see. So this is what is happening here. So it looks to me, the people in the middle, the public, the lay people, we, not the regimes, not the fundamentalists, we need also to educate ourselves and keep going. And at the end of the day, hopefully something happened on the higher level. We cannot, these fundamentalists thing will not go, especially the Middle East.
But they're in every religion. It's not just Islam,
Yeah, I can understand that. What I'm saying, we agree on the their interpretation is not good. We know that. But at the end of the day, the people and their seats, in their castles, they're doing whatever they want. At the end of the day, everything will continue the same and worse. So this is my analysis for that. With my respect to the discussion about the individual people, how they behave, what I do, what you do, and so on and so forth.
I understand what you're saying, but I still say that كما تكون يولى عليكم, meaning the majority of Muslims today, let's face the facts, they are regressing, not progressing. In which way? They are regressing in their interpretation of what Islam and the essence of Islam is all about. They are regressing in the sense that it is somebody else's fault, and somebody else should do this and do that. And here I am sitting waiting for it to happen. If you look at the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 13 years in Mecca, how many left with him? Not many. They sacrificed not for themselves, but for Islam. And look what happened. We were all over the world. The point is, Muslims today, are they willing to go to the central issue of what Islam stands for rather than the artificial manifestation of what Islam is all about? This is my problem. My problem is I talk to a lot of people. Okay, one of my relatives, these are all kuffar, they're all going to hell. I said, how do you know? Are you God to judge what's in their heart? وَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْقُلُوبِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. God only knows what's in their heart. Why are you saying that? When we are regressing in such a way, and in the United States of America, I'm not talking about Lebanon and Syria and all of those. I'm talking here. With all this openness, with all this knowledge, with all this what's going on. Why are we regressing? Why are we shrinking within ourselves instead of opening up to understand what the essence of Islam is all about, which is very inclusive? Inclusive. If the Quran says very clearly, if I wanted you all to be in one group, I would have created you all the same. But no. وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, meaning we created you into tribes and different people so you get to know each other, not to hate each other. This is the issue. The governments we already know. But if you look at the history that I talked about with colonization, with the oppression that has happened in Muslim world, I can't expect a different result than what I see today. I mean, when you go into Lebanon, and I went to, first of all, Muslim school, then French school, lycée français. Then I went to American school. And they were missionaries. They were all missionaries. The Muslim schools were a mess. Why? You see what I'm saying? I mean, this is the result of occupation, of colonization, of superimposing certain ideologies into a group of people, and we adopt them. This is the issue. We need to go to the essence.
2 points. It's not a speech. Really, it's and I finished it on a very happy note.
Put it close to your
I
mouth.
saw today on CNN. I know the first name of the gentleman. He's an anchor man. His first name Ban, and he says, if you have a Muslim neighbor living next to you, you'll be the luckiest person. He said they have the lowest crime, they the most generous, they completely are nice.
Wow.
Really, today on CNN. The other point is, as you probably know, that on the internet, I saw this rabbi who was talking to some elitist people, well educated, and he says, that's not who we are as Jews, to do what we are doing. And he says, when we were in trouble in Europe and other places, the people that took us
Were the Arabs and the Muslims.
the Arabs and the Muslims. And he was very, very strong about it.
True. That's very
So-
true.
Those are minority voices, unfortunately.
Oh, they are minority. Let's face it. I mean, when I get attacked in every lecture by saying your religion is this, your religion, and then not only that, I remember in one lecture at the university where this lady found out I was an Arab. So she stood up and she said, oh, I may have mentioned this to somebody, I don't know, because I use it all the time. It shocks me. You're an Arab? I said, it's not Arab, it's Arab. Yes, I am an Arab. Oh, okay. She sat down. Then she figured out I was Muslim. So she got up and said, "You mean you're Muslim too?" I said, "What is this, double jeopardy?" You see what I'm saying? I mean, they have a notion who we are and who we are not. And sometimes we ourselves perpetrate that notion. That's what I worry about. That's what I worry about. Okay? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Father.
Now, next week I'll be talking about the impact of war on Iraqi women and on women in general. So please come.
Thank you very much.
You're
It
welcome.
was very insightful.
Thank you.
So I have a pet peeve. May I express that?
Thank you.
A pet peeve. And I have this against Egyptians. Oh, hold on. Egyptians. Yeah. Who turned my mic off? So I have this against Egyptians, I have against Pakistanis, Indian Muslims, Lebanese. It's okay. I can reach people with my voice. You look at the newspaper, and there are letters to the editor condemning Muslims and Arabs. And I said, where the hell are Muslims and Arabs? Many years ago, I